things that unite Esperanto speakers no matter what country they're from. But still, obviously, a Japanese speaker of Esperanto is going to bring their own culture to the table, and an American is going to bring their own culture. But that's one of the things that makes it really interesting. I mean, you have this group of people who all have a common language, but they come from different cultures and have different viewpoints, different ways of looking at the world. And so one of the things that Esperanto speakers do is talk about things like that. You know, how you do things in Japan, and how we do things in the US, and how people do things in Romania. And you really learn a lot about different viewpoints and different ways of looking at the world. And I think speakers of Esperanto become more sensitive to different cultures as a result of that.
Can you tell, for instance, I guess, I mean, as an anthropologist, I would be interested in knowing if you have an Esperanto speaker from, say, Indonesia meeting an Esperanto speaker from Mexico City, and that there would be very standard cultural ways that one would introduce oneself, or make eye contact or not make eye contact, or physical gestures that would either be considered threatening or, you know, polite or hospitable, that you see an interface, like a sort of a cultural interface where something else is happening in addition to a common language. I don't know if that's a hard concept to convey,
yeah.
But if you see that in your classes, or if there are instances where that happens.
Maybe. I sort of wish I knew the answer to that question, because it's interesting. That may happen. You know, I think what generally happens, at first glance at any rate, is, say, the Indonesian and the Mexican would come together, and, well, already they have something in common, namely Esperanto. Each of them made this effort to learn this language. So that sort of puts them on some common ground right there. And they may have, you know, read some of the same books, or listened to the same music, or know the same poems by heart and things like that. And so that kind of gives them a common ground that an ordinary Indonesian and an ordinary Mexican wouldn't otherwise have together. But beyond that, when it comes to eye contact and how you introduce people and things like that, I think probably, for the most part, they'd run into the same problems that other people would, except they have the predisposition to sort of like each other and try to work these things out. And certainly they have the language where they can work these things out.
To say, I was blinking, not winking, for instance. Encouraging an example, when's a blank a wink, right?
Right.
That was just a blank.
And I think also another thing that happens is, you know, this person, you know, hypothetical Esperanto speaker from Mexico City, this Indonesian guy that he's talking to, that's not the first time that he's met someone from another country. So if you speak Esperanto and you use it on an active basis, you're going to be doing this a lot. So probably on a, you know, unconscious level, you kind of develop a sensibility to what's kind of a neutral sort of cultural background. And you come to realize what things are just from your own country, and I think you intuitively sort of figure out how to avoid some of those things that might be misunderstood by people from other countries.
I find that sometimes what I do in exactly that situation of two different sets of gestures, if I meet a Japanese Esperantist, I will bow to them and then shake hands. Yeah. So there's a little bit of a confusion of, uh-oh, are we going to do this or are we going to do that? You do both.
Yeah.
And a lot of times, I mean, one of the things that I find really fascinating is when you meet someone, do you kiss them or not? Well, if I look at someone and I see, like, from a distance, ah, you're from France, then, okay, I know I can kiss this person on both cheeks and everything will be fine, right?
But they know you're an American and they shouldn't try.
Yeah, well, exactly. So there's all of those things, and sometimes what will happen in that situation is conceivably they would say, aha, I know what your culture is, you know what my culture is, let's do both. So I've seen the situation where literally shake hands and then kiss both cheeks, right? So there's all kinds of varieties on how to do that. Sometimes it's, well, it's sort of like what happens in the United States. Maybe Germans shake hands and French kiss, so when people meet in the United States, they're kind of uncomfortable, they wind up doing nothing. Well, I think in Esperanto, because of like what Grant is saying, you've done this before. This is ground that we've been across. So you find a more interesting way to do it rather than doing nothing. So I think a combination of gestures is more interesting than avoiding them all. And I think that happens. I'm certainly not the only one who does this, you know. And I've seen other people will do some sort of a combination. And sometimes I like to even kind of play with this. There's a couple of Indian friends that I've met through Esperanto. And I don't know if it's really universal that Indians greet one another with namaste.
I think just Hindus.
Just Hindus?
Yeah.
Okay, well this one particular fellow, Abdul Salem, do you know him?
No.
He's the president of the Bharata Esperanto Liga. Well, he's blind.
Oh.
So this isn't going to mean anything to him, right?
He's probably not a Hindu either.
Exactly. No, he's certainly not like that. Exactly. Exactly. But
Just a guess.
just a guess. But when I see him, he can't see me. I say, "Saluton, Abdul." It makes me feel like, I'm doing something from his culture, even though it might not be for his specific one. But then usually he kind of sticks his hand out. Right? I say, okay, fine. So I've done both, right? Saluton, Abdul, and take the hand.